Hello everybody, this is Catholic Dad, episode number 87, The Right to Bear Arms. I don't know why I haven't touched on this beforehand, but let me first disclose that I'm an unapologetic supporter of the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution, which states, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, period. And so, why should we have a right to bear arms in our nation? You know, there's a lot of good-hearted people out there that kind of just want to see problems go away. And so if you take away firearms, then we could take away illegal murders and whatever else. And I guess that's it's good-hearted, and perhaps it's I would say naive at best. But that's like essentially taking away the fallen nature of man at the same time as taking away their firearms. You can't do it. But here's how the argument goes. Okay, and this is why I think the people that are the pro gun control crowd, you know, the gun control crowd, and they want to take away firearms from people, I think they need to think about this, and they need to think about this in this argument. So, why would we take away the right to bear arms from people? And so the basic argument is this: that people can't be trusted with firearms. Essentially, people can't be trusted with deadly force. Now. And I would argue, I'd go one step further and state that they can't be trusted with deadly force because of their fallen nature. That's actually a statement I would probably agree with, in terms of that when people have tools that can cause fatal violence to other people quite easily, that some people will misuse it. That I can believe in. But here's the deal. What we do is we take people out of our population that have the same fallen nature and the same inclination towards violence, or perhaps more, right? And then we elect them to government, and then we put them in charge of government and put them in charge of our police forces, our intelligence agencies, and even our military. And then we give them an absolute monopoly on the firearms, right? So if the general populace cannot be trusted with firearms, how can the elected body politic be trusted with firearms? And in fact, I would go one step further and state that they are less able to be trusted with a monopoly on firearms, because, who was it? Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Lord Rousseau, or I don't remember who it was, but well, anyway, so absolute power corrupts absolutely. So we take these people with fallen natures, and we put them in power, in charge of their fellow man, and then we give them an absolute monopoly on firearms, meaning we can't trust the people, the body politic, with the firearms. How the heck can we trust the people that we elect with the firearms? And then I'll go one step further, and it's out of a movie, The Gladiator, when Russell Crowe plays Maximus. You know, he was in the initial war scene. The Caesar's dying in the tent, and he calls upon Maximus, and he tells him, he says, "Maximus, you have to be the next Caesar." And then Maximus, you know, doesn't want to be, because he's got this beautiful wife and this wonderful kid at home, and he just wants to go home and be with his family. And he says, "Caesar, I don't want to." And he says, precisely the reason why you need to be the next Caesar. Because people that have the inclination towards seizing power also have the fallen nature of pride. They also have the fallen nature of the domination of their fellow man. And therefore, what Caesar points out is that Maximus, Russell Crowe, doesn't have this inclination to dominate his fellow man, and therefore that's precisely the reason why he needs to be the Caesar, because he would do it out of a sense of duty, not out of a sense of pride and domination. And so therefore you take mortal men out of a population you cannot trust with a fallen nature, and they have an inclination to dominate their fellow man, and then you give them a monopoly on firearms, and then you give them power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. The people in the population which you can at least trust with firearms through basic reasoning are the very ones the gun control people want to put in positions of power and have a monopoly on the firearms. That alone is reason why you shouldn't have gun control. But all that being said, let's talk about historical evidence. I stated in a recent video that I'm reading the Gulag Archipelago. The Gulag Archipelago is written by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He spent 8 years in a Soviet work camp. Essentially, he found himself and found the Lord while he was in the Soviet death camp. But he writes he writes this book about the life and being in a gulag system and what it was all about. And he tells a story, and he tells the story that the communists took power, the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, and they started killing pretty much anybody they wanted. The communists had all the authority and all the power, and the people who didn't have the power, just the basic, the peasant class, the farmer class, the manufacturing class, the Gentiles, you name it, the intelligentsia, the engineers, they were all under the thumb of Soviet dictatorship and autocratic rule. And they were being disposed of randomly in great amounts, and nobody knew who was going to be next, because they created all these weird laws and these hard laws to follow, and pretty much everybody was guilty of a crime just by their very existence. And if they wanted to take somebody away, they would just take them away, and they would disappear forever, and they would be shot and killed, or they'd be put in these labor camps if they were of use to the state. Well, anyway, from 1917 to 1937, millions of people were killed. But in 1937, Stalin stepped up, and he decided he wants to kill at a faster rate. And what he did was, he wasn't sure of who were loyal communists at that point in time, because they had so many years of indiscriminate killing and so many years of just taking people away, making people go away. He didn't know who was a loyal communist or not. So essentially what he did was, he arrested most of the party members in 1937 and shot them, and they went away. And he developed a litmus test or some kind of test to promote people within the party amongst themselves that seemed the most loyal and the most fearful of going away into the camps, the people without independent thought. And he essentially did away with his own party and reinstituted it with new party members in 1937. Well, anyway, so they would issue edicts of the state in these large meetings with all these 200 commie interns, and they would make a pronouncement like, we're going to go to this village, this Kulak village, and we're going to assassinate 500 people. 500 people need to die to keep the people fearful of the communist regime, and then everybody would be called on to applaud and be happy, and so 200 members of the Communist Party would stand and applaud, and they would applaud, and they applaud, and nobody would stop applauding, and they would keep applauding and keep applauding, and they would just keep applauding until somebody grew tired of applauding, or 2 or 3 or 4 people. This could go on for hours, and the first people to sit down and stop applauding, they disappeared that night. They would go away, and they would be viewed as either too independent of thinking, or they were not complete loyalists to the Communist Party. And that's how they kept these people in check. That's how they kept these people from, they checking their loyalties, and if they were, how fearful they were of the Communist Party itself. And these people were so bad to check their loyalty. They say, go kill 500 people in this Kulak village. And they say, no, we ask permission, we want to kill 750. Can we kill 250 more? And they'd say, yes, you can. And those people would get promoted. But just remember, on the receiving end of this, there's these people, they had their firearms that were seized by the state. And nobody ever knew who was an enemy of the state. It could happen at any point in time. Typically, it was the intelligentsia, the landowners, and the wealthy. But it also went to the basic farmer. Most farmers wouldn't put up with this. And so they would go in and they would wipe out whole villages. And what Stalin in 1937 starved out 2 to 4 million people. Maybe I'm making that up. Maybe it's 200,000 people. I can't recall it right now. But because he did not feel they were loyal to the communist interests. And so here's the deal. So how do you put people in prison camps? You go and you arrest them. Would people, knowing what they know, knowing what I just told you, would they resist if they had meaningful resistance? Because most people were just quiet. And then the communists would come in and they would quietly submit to their autocratic rule because they were just hoping it wasn't them. And nobody knew who it was going to be. And so everybody quietly sat back and allowed and tried to prove their party loyalty. Some people would turn in their neighbors before them. Sometimes that caused to be the breaking of them. And so what if that happened? And people had firearms? It wouldn't happen. It would be impossible for such things to happen, because that knock on the night in the door in America is not the same knock on the night in the door in Soviet Russia. In Soviet Russia, the father of the family would say, I have to go away. And then he would get his clothes on, and the troops would come in, and then he would disappear, and they'd no longer see him again because he had no meaningful resistance, and he had no way to defend himself from the soldiers of the Soviets. In America, that's not true. If that happened maybe one time, it would happen 2 times, 3 times. If it caught on, maybe it would happen 500 times. But by the 500th time, everybody would know what was going on. And that knock on the door would be met with a blaze of glory. It would be met with meaningful resistance. And if you were a Soviet agent, or if you were a soldier sent to arrest somebody in the middle of the night, and your fellow comrade started getting shot, if your fellow comrade started having meaningful resistance, would they actually go and do it? Or would perhaps they would think second about their loyalty to the party of the communists, knowing that people were actually well armed and they could put up a fight? This is the kind of government, this is the reason, by the way, for the right to bear arms. It's not related to hunting or fishing or duck hunting or whatever else, or deer hunting. It's actually not even particularly related to personal violence. Well, it can be applied that way. It's about a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And so therefore, when you take mortal men and you corrupt them with power, they have their fallen nature, and then you put them in charge of government and you give them a monopoly on firearms, what happens? Soviet Russia is what happens. That's what happens. It's the Maos of the China. It's the Pol Pots of the Cambodias. It's what's happening in Venezuela now. People that want to dominate other people, and they have the fallen nature to do so, the first thing they go for is the people's meaningful resistance against them. These people that want to be gun controllers in government, they don't want gun control. They want autocracy, and they want power over their fellow man. That's why they want gun control. So this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please like or subscribe and share with your friends if you can. Thank you. God bless. Get the Mass, get the confession. Have a Holy Lent. This is a great time to purify yourselves, and please read a lot of old works. Gulag Archipelago, you could start with that one. God bless you all.